Welcome to the Priority Zero podcast. Stories of service.
Welcome to the Priority Zero podcast. My name's Oresti, and today on the show we have Leone Demartino. Leone was a United States Marine for just over 4 years, having served in Australia and overseas as well as around the United States. He also was a private security contractor in Afghanistan and a police officer now, working through various regions throughout the United States as both a local police officer and a federal police officer. Leone, welcome to the Priority Zero podcast.
Leone, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so believe it or not, I was actually born in Oxford, England. My mother's to an English mother and Italian father. I moved to the States when I was 4 years old, so I really don't remember too much of it. We came over here with my father's family, who was living in New York at the time, and we immigrated, I guess you could call it, to New York, where I grew up in Orange County, which is about 90 miles north of the city. If you hear an accent, it's probably because it's what we call a New York accent. But yeah, I moved to Orange County when I was 4 years old. Unfortunately, it was one of those things where my parents didn't last. We stayed in New York until I was about 6, 7-ish. And then I guess you could say that my upbringing is what got me into wanting to join the military and pursue a career in law enforcement. Kind of like how I am now. Unfortunately, my father went to prison for quite a long time, and growing up, especially hearing the stories of him and the things that he did, being an Italian guy living in New York, I'm sure you could all put two and two together. Unfortunately, it's one of those things where, long story short, my mother testified against my father. He went to prison. Growing up and moving around a lot around the States, being in witness protection and stuff like that. I got to see a lot of the United States. I lived in states like Arizona, California, Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, where ultimately I ended up back in New York when I was 16. My father got out of prison, and I went back and lived with him up until I was about 19. And then I went to school at the University of Albany, and right after high school, I should say, when I was 18. And wasn't really going that well, school. I was an athlete. I thought way too highly of myself. I was playing football and basketball and hung out with the wrong crew, got in trouble, lost everything. And it's kind of like a Cinderella story, I guess you could call it, coming from absolutely nothing, building myself back up, being unfortunately living with a buddy of mine who around this time, right after I messed everything up in school, is when I guess I was approached by a Marine recruiter. And yeah, I guess the rest is history, I guess you could say.
So the time that you made that decision to join the Marines, how long was it before you were in boot camp?
Ooh, so I originally started talking to recruiters when I was 20, and I originally was going to join the Army, the United States Army. I had a boot camp date. I had a recruiter. I had my job picked out. I was getting ready to go sign the contracts. I had already gone to MEPS and all that stuff. MEPS is like the medical side where you test, and they basically give you like the green light to go to boot camp. And I came back to my recruiter's office one day, and he wasn't there, and this Marine was standing outside and asked me why I wanted to join the Army. And I was like, I don't know. I just thought the Army was the way to go. And my recruiter, my Marine Corps recruiter, was like, you don't want to do that. He was like, the Army's a job, like, Marines, tough, and this and that. And he's like, do you know anything about the Marines? And I'm like, no. And he was like, well, why don't you come in and talk to me? So I was waiting for my Army recruiter. I walked into the Marine Corps recruiting station, and he basically just started, I don't know if you know anything about like Marines and the Army over here, but Marines consider themselves like a little bit higher of an echelon than the Army. And I guess
there's a lot of rivalry between them.
Yeah. exactly. There's a ton of rivalry. It's, no, we're better. No, we're better. But if you ask like the average American citizen, they'll tell you that the Marine Corps is like, it's funny to this day. I'll still get asked questions about boot camp. Like, is it true that you guys like have to like raise puppies and then like kill them? And like, those were like the types of questions that I got asked by like family members and stuff like that. I'm like, no, Jesus Christ. Like,
A little bit savage.
oh man. Well, and that's the thing too, is like, Army boot camp is 9 weeks as opposed to Marine Corps boot camp, which is 13 weeks. And if you get out of the Marine Corps and decide to go into another branch, you don't have to go through the boot camp because you've already been through Marine Corps boot camp.
Because it's a higher level, I suppose.
Correct. Like the training's longer and it's more intense. And, there's YouTube videos on it. You could look it up for yourselves. I encourage people to do that. But, I went and spoke to a Marine recruiter, and then, when was this? This was 2010. And then they couldn't give me a boot camp date right away. So I ended up going and finally joining in 2012.
So you waited quite a while.
I did. Yeah, I did. Unfortunately, it's one of those things where if they don't have like a slot open for you, then you don't get to go to boot camp right away, I should say.
So how does it work? Do you go in there and do the testing, and then they, depending on your aptitude, give you a list of what you're kind of qualified for?
Yeah, so it's weird. So like when you first sit down with a Marine recruiter, it's like a psychological game. They put these little tabs of different colors, and it has like different wording on them, and there's like 9 of them. And they ask you to pick out why you're joining the Marine Corps, right? So one will say like educational purposes. What was like another one? Pay or adventure, traveling, stuff like that, right? Yep. So I knew I wanted to go back to school one day, so I chose like educational, traveling, and like challenging myself. So after that, you basically sit down with the recruiter and you talk about what jobs you want, and you talk about things like that, like how if you want to be comm guy, if you want to be an infantryman, if you want to be an artilleryman, if you want to the admin side of things, something that's going to help benefit you in the future or something like that. Well, I knew I always wanted to kick indoors and stuff like that. So I was like, I want to be infantry. I want to be MARSOC. And these recruiters, man, they promise you the absolute world. So we can get you that. We can get you a MARSOC contract. We can get you all this stuff. And they're basically just blowing smoke up your ass to meet their quota, I should say. So then after you sit down with your recruiter, they send you to MEPS. It's like the medical side of it. You do all your medical stuff. They do your background check to make sure you don't have any felonies, if you've ever been arrested. They do your medical science. So like you'll do a drug test, you'll do a blood test. And then basically once all that's cleared and you get the green light, then you sit back down with your recruiter and he's like, okay, now you're going to go take a test, like a written test. That's like math questions, literature questions, common sense questions, mechanical questions, something that'll give you a baseline of where you would.
The general aptitude testing sort of thing.
Right, exactly. is it the same? Do you know? And like, I'm sure it's the same in Australia. Like,
yeah, it'd be very similar.
Yeah, so it's just like that, the aptitude test. And I guess I didn't do too bad. I ended up scoring like a 68 on it. And the recruiter was like, so, you got all these jobs, but you said you wanted to be MARSOC. So I'm going to get you a MARSOC contract. And, we're 18, 19, 20 years old. We're kids. We're like, oh, yeah, cool. And then sure enough, the contract gets put in front of you and then you sign it and you're off to boot camp, a month, 2 months later, whenever they can get a slot for you. Needless to say, I didn't get a MARSOC contract. That was an utter lie. But
and for the people that are listening that don't know what MARSOC is, can you explain MARSOC?
MARSOC would be the equivalent of the Marine Corps Special Forces. So it might have changed, but when I was in, they weren't tier 1 operators. They were more, so like tier 1 operators would be like your Navy SEALs, your Delta Force, your Army Special Forces, Green Berets, yep. Exactly. So,
So what did you end up signing the contract as?
I just went basic infantry, and I hated my life.
So tell us a little bit about boot camp, going into that for the first time. I mean, I've seen a few videos. They take you on the bus. They've got you those little footprints that you go and stand on. Talk me through jumping on that bus and what was going through your head.
So I'm gonna be completely 100% honest here. The videos don't do it justice on YouTube and stuff like that. I mean, I remember when I was a recruit, they get you on this bus. They're driving you down to what's called Marine Corps Recruit Depot, Parris Island in South Carolina, or Marine Corps Recruit Depot, San Diego. There's only two places for the Marine Corps that recruits go to do training. And like I said, it's 13 weeks long. So you pull up onto this bus, and immediately as you're entering, I can recall entering Parris Island in South Carolina, and the driver turns around to us and he says, "Hey, all you guys put your head down in between your legs, like don't lift your head up." And as we're going through the gate, this Marine steps on, he tells us to put our heads between our legs, hold our paper to our chest, like our recruitment papers and stuff like that to our chest. And I remember thinking like, this ain't gonna be bad. Like, I'm a typical kid from New York. I'm like, oh, I'm from New York. Like, this ain't gonna be bad, yada, yada, yada. Well, we get there, we pull up in front of the big depot, which is like these big silver doors that a Marine comes out and he's like, "You'll pass through these doors one time and one time on." But anyway, before that, this Marine Corps drill instructor gets on our bus and immediately just starts yelling, "Sit up straight and look at me now." And what every drill instructor has in common in the Marine Corps is none of them can talk. Their voices are all hoarse. Their voices are all cracked from yelling 24/7. And I remember thinking like, oh, okay, this ain't bad. This is just one guy and there's like 25 of us. You hop off the bus and you go onto these yellow footprints and you're standing at the position of attention. You're not saying anything. And there's like one or two other drill instructors just walking around making sure that, everyone's standing at the position of attention. The guy stands in front of you, in front of those big doors, like those silver doors I was telling you about. And he basically gives you like a what's going to happen. You're going to cross through these doors. You're going to sit down at a desk. You're going to fill out a bunch of paperwork. And then you're going to go through these lines basically to collect your gear. What they don't tell you is that as soon as you get through those doors, there are 20 to 25 drill instructors just all going haywire. I mean, it is absolute chaos. There's papers flying. People are in your face yelling, and you're a kid, so you have no idea what's going on. You're not allowed to look at them. So, the first thing you do is look at them. And next thing you know, you're being shark attacked. Like, you have like 3 or 4 drill instructors all in your face, like 6 inches from your face, all screaming at you, all yelling at you. You're nervous. You basically are just in a total shock. And I remember going through those doors and I dropped my paper, my initial paperwork, and I turned around and go grab it. Well, as soon as I turned around and go grab it, I immediately got hit with 3 or 4 drill instructors all surrounding me, all screaming, "Pick it up, put it down, pick it up, put it down. Scream, aye, aye, sir, aye, aye, sir." And it's just chaos. So you're like, "Aye, aye, sir." You have no idea what to do, where to go. And it's like that basically for the rest of the night. It's interesting. You get to one point where you get done with your paperwork and they march you into this line to where these phones are on the phone booth. Now, in Marine Corps boot camp, when I went through, you weren't allowed to have a cell phone for the entire time you were down there. So for 3 months, no cell phone. The only communication you have is written letters to your family. Yeah. So when they march you in, there's these like phone booths that you go into and you pick up the phone and it's all like robotic. They're screaming at you. You pick up a phone, you make a phone call, and they give you this piece of paper to read off of. "This is recruit Leone Demartino. I have arrived at Parris Island safely. Please do not send anything in the mail. I will contact you in 13 weeks. Mind you, but you're saying all of this and they're screaming at you and you're on the phone with like a loved one and you're like, "I'll contact you in 13 weeks. Goodbye." And then you just hang up the phone.
So your parents probably have no idea what's going on as well.
Oh, your parents hear the screaming in the background. They hear the chaos. They hear the drill instructors going crazy. They hear people crying. They hear recruits screaming, "Aye, aye, sir." And you're just like a robot reading off this piece of paper. "Do not send this recruit anything. This recruit will contact you in 13 weeks or yada, yada, yada. Well, as soon as I got off the phone with my mother at the time, I knew. I was like, holy shit, I do not want to be here. Yeah. So and then it's funny because, like I said, for the rest of the night, they keep you awake for if I remember correctly, I think we're awake for, I want to say like 2 days. They keep you awake for just collecting gear, doing your medical, doing your screenings, getting your shots, getting your haircut, getting your pay started. But they do that specifically because when you do go into like your squad bay 4 training, they want you to be tired, so you go to sleep.
Sleep deprivation.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So kind of, I guess, encompasses your first experience going into boot camp the first day. Talk me through a typical day at boot camp. What can you expect?
So everything in the Marine Corps, and this is where I have to give the Marine Corps a ton of credit. And this is where a lot of the other branches, and especially here in the States, they make fun of us. They say that they brainwash us. They say that they do stuff like that. I've been out for damn near almost 8 years now. And, I still do a lot of the things that I was taught in boot camp, making my bed, cleaning my shoes. But a typical day in the Marine Corps, you wake up at, I want to say it's 04:30. You get up and everything is done robotic isn't really the word. It's done. Everything's done with a purpose. We have these things called Firewatch, and they're basically every hour it switches out. Like somebody's up at the front of we had this huge podium where they would basically log, all the things that happened throughout the night. And there's somebody standing over by the lights. So at 4:30, the drill instructors are what we call in their drill instructor house, which is because they're living with you and you can't see them because they're in basically like there's this huge window and then it's like covered. And then inside that room is like their bunks or racks or whatever you want to call it. And at 4:30, you'll hear, lights, 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 lights. And everyone gets on. There's a huge yellow line that's in front of the bunks. And you'll get online and the drill instructors come out and you're standing at the position of attention. You're really not saying anything until the drill instructor comes out. And he'll say, he'll basically get a head count and then everybody will go around and you'll say, recruit 1, recruit 2, recruit 3, recruit 4. And then he'll tell you for example, he'll tell you to get your hygiene kit. So he'll be like, hygiene kits, and everybody repeats it. Hygiene kits, aye, aye, sir. And then he goes, move. And then everyone will run back to their we had these things called foot lockers, and inside the foot lockers was uniforms, hygiene kit, stuff like that. And then you'll get back online and it's just nonstop commands hygiene kit away, boots, aye, aye, sir. Uniform top, aye, aye, sir. And if you're not screaming or being loud enough, they'll be like, your drill instructors. And mind you, you're at the position of attention the entire time. And it's just nonstop, just chaos the first, I want to say 7 weeks, because you have other drill instructors running up and down the line, yelling at recruits, going crazy. And this is your first night in boot camp, so you're really not used to it. And like I said, the videos don't do it a lot of justice, because I remember just being online every morning and being like, I hate my life. What made me want to consider this shit? But like I said, I give the Marine Corps a lot of credit, because when it comes to discipline, I like to tell the story. When I was a Lance Corporal, which is a very low rank in the Marine Corps, I was on an Army base for training one time, and this Sergeant Major walked up to me, and I was standing there with my 2 buddies, and we immediately went to parade rest, and this Sergeant Major was like, don't let these soldiers, influence you guys, influence you Marines, man. You guys are badass. And at first we all thought we were in trouble, but he was just like, I really admire you Marines, man. You guys' discipline is almost unheard of in the Army. Yeah, and that's all because of boot camp, because you immediately start with just absolute discipline at boot camp. And as much as I hated my life, it was a really good experience that I look back on now, and I'm just like, wow, here we are 10 years later, and 11 years later. And I think to myself, I consider myself lucky now that I got the honor to experience that stuff.
Yeah, like they said, the title Marine can't be bought; it has to be earned.
Exactly. And the entire time that you're at Paris Island or Recruit Depot San Diego, you're not a person. You don't get to refer to yourself as, Demartino would like. You know, what really got me down there is you had to request everything. So when you go talk to your drill instructors, I'll never forget one time I needed to fill up my canteen, and I walked up to my drill instructor, Staff Sergeant Wilson. I'll never forget this. And I was like, this recruit requests permission to fill up his canteen. And I didn't yell at him. And he got up in my face and was just like, I'm yelling at you. And I mean, spit is just flying on top of me. And he's like, I'm yelling at you, so you'll yell back at me. And I'm like, this recruit. And after a while, the constant yelling that you're doing, your voice starts to go hoarse. And it's just, your voice starts to hurt after a while because you're constantly yelling, back at your drill instructors, not in a bad way, but like a motivational way. Like he said, I'm yelling at you, so you're going to yell it back at me.
So it's more motivation, more controlled aggression, trying to learn those skills. Is that right?
Exactly. And it's all for a purpose. It's to build you up, to build that confidence. Like, yes, I'm in your face yelling, but I'm trying to instill those discipline, that confidence in you to not be afraid. So I'm yelling at you, you will yell back at me, type of thing. And, I have buddies that are drill instructors now, man, and they absolutely love it. I mean, the hours suck, but when you get an initial recruit, coming in with the long hair, the attitude, the me attitude, forget everyone else. And then when you look at the finished product, he's like, a buddy of mine will tell you it's like night and day. It's like really special to see that.
Nice. Talk to me about some of the training that you go through in the Marine Corps.
So boot camp, it's an initial training. So you're not really doing like the hardcore stuff that you would like out in the fleet. You're mostly doing like a ton of PT. It's funny. I went to boot camp 225 pounds and I came out like a little less than 200 because you're constantly, you wake up in the morning, you do PT. Throughout the day, you're doing PT. These things called smoke sessions. Well, that's what we call it. I think now they're called like incentive training or something like that. It's basically where they take you to like a sand pit and they smoke you because you messed up. And I lived in the sand pit. I was constantly getting in trouble every day for something. It's just nonstop. You're constantly running and doing stuff. Yeah, there are days where you sit in a class for a lot of stuff, but during those changing of classes, you're outside doing more PT. You're doing a lot of drill at boot camp. You're doing a ton of drill. Like we used to call it popping sticks, where you take your rifle and you're like doing all these like really cool movements. I'm sure everyone has seen the videos of like the Marine Corps drill team.
Yep.
And they look phenomenal. And that's basically what you're doing in boot camp to get you to listen to instructions. And the way that it was explained to me is like you're being taught to move with a group of individuals, a large group of individuals in the fastest time possible in a controlled, disciplined manner. And they kind of relate it to like combat and stuff like that. And you're doing a lot of drill, but you do a lot of like stuff on the rifle range. In the Marine Corps, you do stuff like in the pool at boot camp. You'll jump in the pool with like your gear and your boots on, and then like you'll swim, which looking back was hilarious because we had these things called iron ducks where people couldn't swim. And Marine Corps, like they'll teach you to swim. Like you're gonna swim.
Yeah, you're gonna swim. It's not an option.
It's not an option. Like you're going into the pool. You're gonna go into the pool whether you like it or not. And
was there many people that couldn't swim?
Oh man, there were so many guys that couldn't swim.
Really?
And when you jump in the pool with your gear and your boots on, all that stuff, it just flows with water. And it's like I said, it's like an iron duck. And you just go to the bottom. And a lot of guys would freak out and they would start screaming, help, help, obviously they have guys they're not going to let you drown. There's guys at the bottom of the pool waiting for something like that. There's other instructors in the pool with you. But you get those guys, man, they freak out and they try to drag those drill instructors down with them. And it's hilarious when they get out of the pool. I was always good at swimming. So like there's a thing, it's called, they try to build your confidence by making you jump off like a diving board, like 20 feet in the air
Gotcha.
with like your gear. And as soon as you hit the water, you go all the way down to the bottom, but like you push off and you go all the way back up. I enjoy swimming. So for me, it wasn't a problem, but I remember that a lot of guys, they get pushed back in boot camp because they fail the pool.
Well, you'd think if someone wanted to join the Marines, obviously swimming would be a big part of it. They would get the lessons and have a basic understanding of swimming, or basic ability of swimming anyway.
It's weird, man. You can't make sense out of nonsense. And people go into this thinking that, I'll just skate by and get through it. And I had a buddy, Chevalier. He got hurt while he was in boot camp and he got pushed back. But like if you fail a phase in boot camp, they push you back. So he got hurt. He stayed at Paris Island for like 6 months. I was like, screw this, dude. I was like, I give you a lot of credit. And that just goes to show like the dedication of wanting to be a United States Marine. A lot of guys, they want that title so bad that they will do their medical time down there and then continue on in the Marine Corps.
All right. So you come into the Marines, boot camps kind of giving you the overall outlook on what the Marine Corps is and what's expected of you. From that, where do you go?
So after boot camp, you go to this thing. It's called Marine Corps combat training, I think, or it all depends on your job. Like infantry dudes, they go to it's kind of like their infantry school, and then like the non-infantry Marines, they go to like a lessened version of it, and then they go to like their job schools. And that, depending on, so like, I think mine was like 6 weeks, I think. And then after that, you go to your unit. You immediately finish training, and then like that night, they have you on a plane going to what's called like the fleet, your unit. And but I'll tell you right now, what a lot of people probably won't tell you is the fleet is actually a lot harder than boot camp. The Marine Corps gets a bad rap, man. Especially in the fleet, and I totally understand why. A lot of guys, they do their initial 4 years and just get out. For me, the Marine Corps and like Marine Corps fleet versus like boot camp was so much more easier for me, only because everything's structured at boot camp and you're being told what to do, when to do it, where to do it. And when you get to the fleet, there's really no one holding your hand. And with all the problems in the fleet, I struggled in the Marine Corps fleet. I did. I constantly struggled. And there was a point there too where I was constantly getting in trouble. And I didn't know if I was going to be able to finish out my contract and get an honorable discharge, to be honest.
So what kind of skills do you learn there going into the fleet? So that I'm guessing gives you your infantry skills.
Yeah, so like they teach you your basic rifle skills. You'll do like maneuver under fire drills. You'll sleep outside. Like you'll do. They give you basically the tools of what it's going to look like when you go to like a forward operating area, like a deployment. Part of it's like digging fighting holes. Part of it's like night ranges. I always thought the night ranges were awesome. So like my brother, for example, he's like a mortarman. He did a lot of stuff with like mortars at his school, but they teach him like, how to basically use the operating system. You basically are taught the initial skills going into the fleet of what being an actual like combat Marine does, with the shooting, the maneuvers, the radio, how to use radio etiquette, stuff like that. And you're basically being taught like how to use those skills in that area, I should say.
Did anyone from your boot camp actually come into the fleet with you?
They did, yeah. So I actually went to boot camp with a buddy of mine, Brower, and his dad was actually my sergeant major for a really long time. And we served together up until he got orders while we were in the fleet together, because, I mean, his dad had a ton of connections. So he ended up getting orders to embassy duty, where he moved around the world, basically, like going to like different embassies and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I always wanted to do something like that. And then it's funny when I hit the fleet and they were like, "No, you don't have a MARSOC contract. No, you don't have MSG. You're not going to be doing any of that stuff. Like, here's a broom, go sweep." Like,
What was going through your mind?
There were times when I was in the fleet where I was like, I basically said, screw this. Like, I'm done. They can kick me out because, oh man. And I think if I remember correctly, I got NJP'd when I was in Australia.
You did, yes. I remember that.
I did, yeah.
Kind of messed with a couple of our plans, that did.
It did, man. It definitely did. And that wasn't the first one either. I had really, really, really bad leadership when I was in the Marine Corps. And it sucks because I went to boot camp with guys who are still in to this day and they love it. But then when I tell people about my Marine Corps experience, they're just like, that happens in the Marine Corps? And I'm like, you have no idea the amount of bullshit, I should say, that goes on. I like to tell people like this: when a major general knows who Lance Corporal Demartino is, that's when you know like stuff is screwed up.
Yep. Yeah, I remember your time in Australia. That was a good time.
Yeah, dude, I had the blast there, but I got in so much trouble, man. And not because of the Aussies, not because of them, but because of other Marines. I got in so much trouble. Looking back, man, I wish I could run into a few of those guys just so I could be like, hey, you were real tough in the Marine Corps, man.
I remember specifically someone that you shared a room with. I can't quite remember his name. And that's the one. That's the one. I remember some stories about him.
Man,
there's definitely some characters that I met.
Oh, dude, you met a variety of Marine Corps characters. Let me tell you, but was a special Marine, and I mean that in every sense of the word.
We'll leave it at that. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah, we'll stay appropriate. But you remember the stuff with Hyde, and that's the type of shit that I'm talking about. That's the stuff that I had to deal with on a daily basis that I just couldn't cope with. I'll put it to you that way.
Yeah, personalities are definitely the hardest thing to deal with, especially when you're living in such close proximity to each other. From what I remember, there was 1 room, 2 bunks. Is that right?
Yeah, 1 room, and it was 2 bunks, and we called them the cans because they were they were like aluminum boxes, basically.
Yeah, they were shipping containers, basically.
Shipping containers. And what's funny, man? For such a great training opportunity, going to Australia, training with the Australians, doing a lot of cool shit while we were down there. Only my unit, only my leadership could make something so good and turn it into absolute shit. Because, like I said, Keith, Tackett, all those guys, we had a blast every time we left the base, whether we went to the casino or we went out of town, or
Lara, Galelos, all them.
Exactly. Like when we hang out with you or something like that, we had a blast. But unfortunately, leave it up to Marine Corps leadership to take a good thing and turn it into something bad.
Very, very unfortunate that.
It's unfortunate, man, because you make such good memories down there, and then we ended up on the internet because our leadership had us sweeping the grass. And when I tell people like that, they're like, sweeping the grass? I'm like, yeah, like we used to sweep the grass. That's how they used to mess with us. And it served no purpose other than to piss us off, especially me. And that's why I used to get into so much trouble down there because guys, I don't know if you remember me, but how big I was, but
I remember.
I'm a big guy. I'm 6'4", 260 pounds, and I could easily hurt my leadership, and that's what I used to get into them with. Because the only time that they wanted to yell at me was when they were trying to like haze me or something like that, and I wouldn't put up with it. I would get in trouble, and then they'd be like, "Oh, you're confined to your room for the next 2 weeks," and then I'm like, "Great." And then I would get in trouble because I would sneak out of my room and like and it sucks because when I tell people stories like this, they're like, "Oh, you must have had a good time down there," which we did. I loved every minute of being down there, especially hanging out with you and a bunch of the other Aussie guys. But yeah, man, I tell people like this: I miss the clowns, but I don't miss the circus.
Yeah, I gotcha. That's a good analogy, actually. That's a good analogy. So, throughout the Marine Corps, you obviously did a deployment to Australia. Was there any other deployments on the cards for you?
Yep. Went to Kuwait, went to Jordan, and then I was on ship for a little bit, and then we bounced around on ship at a couple of different places. Those places were interesting, not because everybody thinks you're going into some combat zone over there, but you're not. It's more like we called it like a booze cruise. Like you're basically just going there to pull security for whatever country you're in. And that's, I had a good time over there. I enjoyed the culture. I enjoyed the photos. I enjoyed the food. Oh, dude, the food. I mean, you're Mediterranean, so I don't have to tell you about the food. Oh God, the food. But yeah, just other than that, my Marine Corps career was cut short. Really, I didn't get an opportunity to do a lot of the things that I wanted to do while I was in, because again, I didn't get to do the job I wanted to do, and which is ironic because when I was doing private security, I was actually on a camp in Afghanistan with MARSOC, but yeah, I didn't get to do a lot in my Marine Corps career, man. Everybody thinks, I was this badass door kicker and I got to do all this like cool shit and storm beaches and what you see in the movies basically. And I'm like, no, it's like the complete opposite. Like I didn't want to fight the Taliban when I was in the Marine Corps. I wanted to fight my Marine Corps leadership more than I wanted to fight the Taliban, to be honest.
Yeah, what was one of the highlights of being in the Marines for you?
Honestly, man, and I think this is everyone will say this to you that you ask this to, is the friends that you make and the experiences that you go through in the Marine Corps with those friends. You will never experience anything like that. I can remember a field op. We were out in the field. It was pissing rain on us the entire month or whatever it was. We were out there hating life. We're on fire watch. We're sleep deprived. We're hungry, we're tired, there's no electronics, so you're basically just hating life. But, I had Jeremy and I had Keith and a couple of my other buddies, and you just build a camaraderie that you don't experience out in the civilian world. And to this day, I still talk to a ton of my Marine Corps buddies, and they will all tell you the same thing. You will never make friends out in the civilian world like you did while you were in the Marine Corps. When you were sitting there hating life, contemplating why the hell am I here, and the only thing that got you through it was like your Marine Corps buddies. So for me, the highlight of my Marine Corps career was just the camaraderie, the building of like the quote unquote like brotherhood, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I've heard that from a lot of military personnel, first responders, police, ambulance. It's really all about the people. You really got each other's backs. You look after each other.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure it's the same thing in your field. You guys, you build this camaraderie with your guys, and you basically put your life in his hands, and he puts his life in your hands. You just build a bond that is like, I can remember getting into trouble with Jeremy. And I just remember thinking to myself, well, if he's going down, like I'm gonna just go down with him, screw it. But there's so many good times too. And when you get out, like now, I don't get to see Jeremy every day. I don't get to see Keith every day. I don't get to see a lot of them every single day. I'm lucky if I see them once, maybe twice a year. That's probably the number one thing you take from the Marine Corps is that bond, that brotherhood, that unshakable like bond that you build with your guys, and it's unlike any other. And like I think you said it best too. It's the same in the whether you're a paramedic, a police officer, or military, first responder, whatever. Those type of relationships only come around like very very few, and someone's life, and you really have to take advantage of those.
Yep, it's the type of friendship you can, not see each other, not talk for 6-7 months. As soon as you see each other, it just picks back up where you left off.
Exactly.
Nothing's changed. Yep.
Exactly. And, I went to Pittsburgh last year to see Jeremy, and I hadn't seen Keith in 4, maybe 5 years. And we just immediately, it was like right where we left off. It was like we didn't skip a beat. Guys like that, you really have to be grateful that they came into your life and you were able to experience a bond like that. Like you said, you don't see each other for 6-7 months, and when you don't skip a beat, that's how like that was a good friendship.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've done your 4 years as a Marine. The time's coming up for you to leave. What was going through your head? What was your next plan?
So when I was getting out of the Marine Corps, my last 3 months in the Marine Corps, man, my leadership was so bad. They were trying to find ways to kick me out. And all I wanted to do was just get to the end of the tunnel, because I knew when I joined the Marine Corps, I wanted to go back to school. School was my number one thing. No one in my family went to college, so I wanted to be the first one to go to college. I wanted to be that guy. And especially with my upbringing, people used to think, oh, he's going to be like his father. He's going to be in and out of prison his whole life, yada, yada, yada. I knew I wanted to go back to school. So I knew if I could get out of the Marine Corps honorably, I could go back to school. I wouldn't have to take out student loans because I would have my GI Bill. So my last 3 months in the Marine Corps, I was applying to schools back home in New York. I must have applied to, 10, 15 different schools. And I knew as soon as I signed that dotted line to get out of the Marine Corps, I was out. I was in my truck. I got out of the Marine Corps at 2:00 in the afternoon on a Friday. And by 3:00, I was on the highway driving from California back to New York, my stuff packed up. I wanted nothing to do with the Marine Corps. I just wanted to go home and be left alone. And I wanted to get home so bad. But the unfortunate thing with guys when they get out of the Marine Corps, the vast majority of them get out thinking, oh, I'll go to school, I'll get a job. But they don't do a good job in the Marine Corps of is preparing you for civilian life. And a lot of guys get out and they don't know what benefits they have. They don't know about the GI Bill. They don't know how to use the GI Bill. They don't know how to go about finding a job. So it's very unfortunate. I have buddies that got out the same time I did, and they fell on their face. And I had one buddy who was living out of a tent on a beach in California.
Wow, that's having veterans do that, that's not right. We need
It's
to be looking
not.
after the people. Yeah.
It's definitely not. And unfortunately, I can't speak for other countries, but in the United States, the whole homeless veteran thing it's really bad here. It's extremely bad. The healthcare system for veterans is almost non-existent, and it's just one of those political things that is extremely unfortunate. But in my case, I knew I didn't want to be like that. And as much as I hated my unit in the Marine Corps and I hated my leadership, I used their horrible motivation to basically get a job, go to school full time, and ultimately graduate. I used their shitty leadership and how they treated me as basically like fuel. It's unfortunate, man, because I know a lot of guys, like I said, they just got out and they couldn't figure it out, and then they go back in. A lot of Marines, they get out and they go into the Army, to be honest. That's another thing a lot of people don't tell you. I know I can name like 3 people right now that got out of the Marine Corps, couldn't take civilian life, couldn't find a job, couldn't hold a job, and they went back into the military, but instead they went into the Army.
Yeah, I've heard from a few people being in the Army or the Marines or the military, it's basically an institution. You're institutionalized for however long you're in that, dislimitatively being in prison, but you know what I mean?
No, it's absolutely true, man. I mean, especially Marines too. You're so institutionalized that, again, just to go back, you're being told what to do, when to do it, where to do it. You're being told when you can eat, when you can't eat, what you can and can't do. And a lot of guys get into that mentality, and then they go out into the civilian world and they struggle so hard. And a lot of guys don't make it. And I couldn't have said it better. I think you actually put it perfectly. It's the institute that they feel like they can't live or go on without it. And it's just like guys when they get out of prison, they go right back because unfortunately that's like all they know.
Once you got out, you obviously started school. You got into a school. What were you studying?
So I got out. I went back to the University of Albany for criminal justice because I knew when I got out of the Marine Corps I was going to go into law enforcement. I knew I always wanted to do something in law enforcement, whether that was being a police officer or working for some federal agency or something like that. And I went back to school. I graduated with my bachelor's in criminal justice. And it's funny because when I graduated school, I sent a message to my old first sergeant and basically thanked him for basically treating me like shit for all those years. Because I was like, you told me, I'll never forget this. I'm getting out of the Marine Corps, and my lieutenant and my first sergeant walk up to me, and my lieutenant, I'll never forget this, Lieutenant Worthington goes, DeMartino, you're going to be lucky if you find a bridge to live under. And I always took those words and I ran with it. And I always used those words and their actions towards me as fuel to get where I needed to go in the next phase of my life. And I graduated. I actually graduated with a 3.8 grade point average from University of Albany. And I knew as soon as I graduated, I was going to do something in law enforcement. So, yeah, I used my degree. I was talking to a buddy at the time who got me my first law enforcement position as a police officer in New Hampshire. So I went and did that. I took the test, scored really well. I did the interview. Everyone liked me. I became a police officer in New Hampshire. And I did that for almost a year before the institution got me again.
So explain to me a little bit about this police officer role in New Hampshire. So obviously they have their own boot camp, is that right?
Yeah. So it was for a local agency, basically a local township, and it was a really small town. I think it was like maybe 8,000 or 9,000 people in this town, maybe.
So did you find your military career obviously help you prepare for that boot camp?
Not really. No, not really. Because for me, it was so dumbed down that like when instructors at the police academy would like yell at you and stuff, it didn't faze me. I used to get in trouble at the academy for laughing. I used to laugh so much. Like, it's not as strict as Marine Corps boot camp at all. It's instructors, they're yelling, but they're doing it from such a distance that like it's comical. And I used to get in trouble all the time at the academy because the head instructor used to come up to me and be like, DeMartino, like, why are you such a problem? I'm like, I'm not a problem. This is just funny to me. Yeah, this is just funny that, I mean, you guys know I was in the Marine Corps. Like, you're yelling at me and stuff like that isn't going to faze me. Like, go yell at one of these kids without any life experience.
Yeah, been there, done that sort of thing.
Exactly, and I used to laugh at a lot of the instructors because they used to be like, oh, you're not going to be prepared for when you're out in the field and yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, okay.
Just play the game while you're in.
Exactly. And I struggled with that because, I'll be the first one to admit, like, I would definitely more than likely fall into the category of being a narcissist. And for me, at the academy, especially with all these young kids with no life experience, it's funny. I had a buddy Force in the academy. We used to get in trouble all the time because we'd be online and the instructors would be like giving us instructions and we'd be sitting there joking, like fooling around. I'll never forget, like, we're all getting ready to shower and everybody's like all nervous. And like Force and I, we're both Marine Corps veterans. And I walk into the shower room and I'm like, all right, boys, let's cut down the shower time. Let's all double and triple it up in the showers. And everyone just looked at me like I was crazy.
That dark sense of humor that we all get.
Exactly. Especially these young kids, they're all looking at me and they're like, "This guy's crazy," and I'm like, "All right, boys, give me two. Who's gonna hop in here with me?" Like, and it didn't bother me, but obviously it bothered them, and I got in trouble for that. And that, like you said perfectly, that dark sense of humor that you get in these fields, and you don't mean anything by it. Like, I wasn't trying to be disrespectful. I was just trying to be
Trying
funny.
to be funny. Yep.
Exactly. I was just trying to be funny, but it wasn't bad. So I did that for 18 weeks. Got out, and you go through this thing called a FTO program, which is like a field training officer program, which is basically your first year. You have somebody like a supervisor with you the entire time, going to calls, doing traffic stops.
Like a mentor.
Yeah, exactly. Like a mentor, making sure that when you are on your own, you don't get killed, basically. And my FTO was a good guy. He was. I got to give him a lot of credit. Trevor, he was a funny dude. He was. Unfortunately, though, I did get caught up in the drama of a small town department. And that didn't last very long. Like I said, I was there for about a year. And then I was like, this ain't for me. And well, I thought it wasn't for me back in this career. But yeah, that wasn't the federal position. That was for the local township. So I had a good time with that. I did. I took it for granted. But again, the institution snatched me right back up.
So where to from that? You've left the police department?
Yeah, so my little brother hits me up and he goes, "Hey man, I got a gig as a private military contractor. I want you to come with me." And I'm like, oh God. When you think of America and private military contractors, the first thing that pops in people's heads are Blackwater.
Blackwater, exactly. Academia or something they're called now. They've changed names since then.
So that's ultimately who we ended up working for.
Right.
And as much as I hated the military, here I was in a pseudo military institution working for the State Department. And the entire time, my little brother, who just gotten out of the Marine Corps himself, was like, I didn't get enough while I was in the Marine Corps. I want to go back. And I'm like, I'm not going back to the Marine Corps, man. And he's like, no, we'll go be military contractors. And I'm like, okay. So he was like, a recruiter's going to hit you up and just tell them that, I got hired already and, you're going to come with me. And I'm like, this is way too good to be true. Like, they're not this. I'll talk to the recruiter.
Shouldn't be that easy. Yeah.
Exactly. So this guy hits me up and he says, "Hey, is this Leone Demartino? I heard that you're interested in some contract work." Well, I only have a contract for Afghanistan open right now. I don't have anything for, at that time, guys were going to like Syria, I believe. Syria or Iraq. One of those. He says, I only have an opening for Afghanistan. And I was like, okay, here we go. And I was like, look, man, I know you're going to promise me the world. He was like, no, dude, this ain't the military. Like, you either want it or you don't. Like, we're not going to promise you anything. Like, this is your job. And I really respected him after he said that, because I'm like, well, what is this in pay? He's like, well, dude, we're going to pay you and you're going to do a job. And this ain't going to be the military. And I'm like, well, do you have to shave your beard? He's like, no, you're not understanding. Like, this isn't the military. And as soon as he said that, I was like, okay. So I had buddies that had done contract work, and, I immediately called up one of my buddies and he was like, dude, you'll love it. The work sucks, but he was like, you don't have to like shave. There's no like screaming, aye, sir. There's no rank and all that bullshit. He was like, you'll have a boss, you'll have a supervisor and like a team leader. But like, other than that, you can pretty much do what you want. And I'm like, all right, cool. So I called my little brother back and I'm like, we're really going to go to Afghanistan. He's like, yeah. My little brother, he's 6 years younger than me. So at this time I am 29, because I turned 30 when I was in Afghanistan. Okay, yeah, so 29. And he was 23. and he was all excited to go. And sure enough, they send us over the paperwork, we do the background, we do all that stuff. And these contract companies, it's not like the military, man. When you sign that dotted line, they get you out like the next day. And because, the government's paying these contract agencies, these companies, a lot of money to basically go around the red tape. But yeah, we ended up back in North Carolina at a training facility down there in Moyock, North Carolina. We stayed there for about a month doing training with weapons, up armored vehicles, vehicle maneuvers. I have to say it was really good training. It was actually training that I didn't receive in the Marine Corps. And you're there with a bunch of veterans, and
I suppose that'd probably be prerequisite as well, being some sort of military veteran or police officer.
Yeah, it was. So like at that time, you had to be combat arms, which is like your job title in the Marine Corps, and you had to have some sort of deployment, like somewhere in a actual what they considered a red zone area, which was like at that time, it was like Jordan, Iraq, Afghanistan,
so war
Syria,
or warlike operations.
Africa, exactly. Yeah, so like some sort of like operating area. When I sent in my DD 214, they were like, that was one of the things that almost jammed me up, because they were like, you needed at least 1 year in one of those countries. And at that time, I had only had 6 months in Jordan and like Kuwait, which wasn't considered a red zone. So they were like, we're going to have to get you a waiver. And I was like, okay. But it went through really fast. They got the waiver. And me and my little brother were down in North Carolina. Then like next week, the next thing I know, we're on a freaking plane to Afghanistan. I guess the rest is history.
Yeah, I remember, us kind of chatting while you're over there via Messenger and that sort of stuff. And you're telling me, there's a blast that's just gone off outside the building, and
yeah. So unfortunately, so that particular camp that we were on, at that time, I was down in Kandahar. I was at Camp Valdez down in Kandahar, which was like special forces, like black site, like with MARSOC. They had a couple Navy SEALs on there. And I was down there doing basically like QRF, like quick reaction force. And me and my little brother had gotten split up for a short amount of time, because he was on a separate team and I was on another team. Because what they do is when you get over there, they don't put like family together, just in case, I guess, for liability reasons, something does happen. So I'm flying back to Kabul, and my little brother is at, I forget what camp he was at in Kabul. I want to say it was Camp Alpha. I could be wrong. But that particular day, I had just landed back in Kabul, and we're going back. They're driving me back. It's like 4:00 in the morning. And all of a sudden we hear this like boom, like head rocking, like what the hell was that? Like I remember getting a message from my little brother. I think it was like WhatsApp or something like that. He's like, hey man, they just attacked us with a VBID and I'm pretty fucked up. And I'm like, now communications are cut. I can't get through to him. VBID is basically a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device. So what they do over there is basically they are extremely good and extremely effective at building these bombs, basically, that they either put in the ground, that basically when a car runs over or a vehicle or something hits it hits a pressure plate and then it causes an explosion. And what they do with these things is they wire them through the car. That particular night, they parked the vehicle right alongside the barrier where he was at and his team was at. And they parked it right next there. Nobody thought anything of it. Why? I don't know. Somebody wasn't doing their job that night, that morning. And it went off, and he had just I guess him and his team were like coming back from something, and he ended up getting caught in the blast, and him and his buddies took like massive amounts of shrapnel. One of his buddies said was unconscious for a little bit too, just because of how big the explosion was. Yeah, I remember they tried hurry up on us, like getting us back to the site that they were at, but we were having a hard time getting to it because now what they did was they blew a hole in the wall, and then about 13 or 14 Taliban fighters like stormed through the wall, and they ended up having to like basically engage with them. So we didn't want to get caught in the crossfire. So the guy who's driving my Vic is basically like, all the chatter's coming through the radio, everything is chaos, and they're basically like, hey guys, they're not going to let us back onto the camp. And I was like, the fuck, they aren't. Like, my little brother's there, you know? And again, I couldn't get in touch with them. And we must have sat there for what, a couple of hours until we got the green light to basically go to the camp. But by the time that we had gotten there, everything was starting to die down. QRF was already there. We were attached to a ranger battalion who was out on mission at that time somewhere in the mountains, and they flew them back. And I guess they all did their thing. And yeah, it was pretty scary, you know. I really didn't care what happened to me, but you know, when your little brother gets caught up in something like that, you know, as soon as we got back, there was still a small little contingency going on. Like, you know, QRF was engaging like a very small it's insurgency, I guess, like a small little group of Taliban fighters, but it wasn't anything serious. I went to the medical wing where they had like a medical bay area, like tent set up. I go to my brother and his team leader's standing outside, and I'm like, hey, is he good? Like, you know, I basically asked, I was like, you know, is he dead? He's like, no, man, he's not dead. Like, we didn't take any casualties. Luckily, no one died. I mean, other than the casualties of the civilians who got hurt that day. But as far as contractors and military personnel, there were no casualties. So I come walking in, and he's laying there, and I'm just like, I walked out to him and was like, you're still alive? And he turned over and he just gave me this huge smile, and he's like, yeah.
Another day at the office.
Another day. And I was like, do you regret coming over here now? And, you know, we talked, but we had a good conversation. And yeah, you know, in situations like that, man, it's funny when I tell people that story, they're just like, they always stop and they're like, wait, your actual little brother? And I'm like, yeah, my actual little brother. I think as far as deployments goes, that's probably my number one memory of anything while we were over there.
Yeah, that's quite a story. So how long were you there for in total?
So my first contract, I was there for 6 months. And then my second one, I was only there for 4 months because this was around like the time of like COVID hitting and stuff like that. And so they all flew us back home.
You got back from this security contractor gig in Afghanistan. What did you do from there?
So I got back, and it's weird. You know, it's hard to explain to people. I immediately wanted to go back. Because society, I wasn't even angry at like the stuff that happened in Afghanistan. I was angry at society. And, you know, the fact that there were, you know, in that particular case, all these civilian casualties, and no one back home knew about it. No one back home gave a shit. And I immediately wanted to go back. So because now I had my time in service in this particular agency, I got offered to go to Iraq this time. And it was funny because another buddy who I served with in the Marine Corps was in Iraq, and I called him and I was like, hey, I'm on my way. And, you know, the details were all sorted. I had my date to leave and all that other stuff. And my little brother, I'll never forget, I go have dinner with him. He's like, dude, I think we're done. And I'm like, what do you mean we're done? He was like, I think we're done. And I'm like, done with contracting or just like done with life in general? He's like, no, I think I'm done with contracting. And he's like, he basically sat me down. He was like, you know, if you want to go back over there, I support it, but I don't think you should. He was like, there's no point in being over there anymore, man. He was like, there's no more point in fighting over there. There's no more point. People over there, and it's the truth. Like, we were over there for so long that you talk to these younger generations over there. They don't have any clue why we're over there. And we had a good conversation. We talked for maybe 2-3 hours. And I was like, you know what? You're right. And plus, contracting isn't really a career. It's more of a spur of the moment type of thing. It's a paycheck, basically. And guys do it so that they can fill a void.
It's a high risk paycheck.
Well, it is, you know, and that's another reason why guys do it too, is the money. You know, it's really, really good money over there. And depending on what you do, it's extreme. Sometimes the risk is worth the reward. And but we talked, and I was like, you know what? I think I want to go back to school and get my master's. And I told him I wanted to go back and be a cop again. I enrolled back in school, and this time I was going for my master's in business administration. I was talking to a buddy, and he was like, hey man, I know you don't want to go back to like the local department, but have you ever thought about like federal police? And I was like, what is that? Like a different like federal agency? And he was like, pretty much. Like, in the States, there's like 1,000 different federal agencies, all with law enforcement like positions, basically, I should say. So this particular position that I work for now is the Department of Defense Police. So I threw in my application. I didn't hear anything for like a month or two. And I'm going to school. I'm working a dead-end job. I'm basically working as a security guard for this company called Dunbar, which I'm taking like bags of cash to banks, basically back and forth. Yep. And I got a call from my chief at that time. He's like, hey, you know, are you so-and-so? Are you Leone Demartino? I'm like, yes. He's like, here, I see that you have law enforcement experience. Are you still interested in this position? And I'm like, absolutely. Like, yeah, let's do it. And at this time, it was in Vermont. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. Like, this is a career move for me. I want to get back into law enforcement. And it's ironic because he worked for Constellus, which is the same contracting company that I worked for. And I think that's pretty much why I got my foot in the door. And we call it in the federal system because like once you're in the federal system, it's like, it's super hard to get into the federal system, and it's super hard to like basically be let go from the federal system.
Yeah, because you can move around, do lots of different positions and have a whole career through that system.
Exactly. I mean, you look at what I've done in the past like 2 or 3 years. I've been all over the United States because of this position. You know, I went from Vermont back to New Hampshire to Alaska for the past year, and now I'm in North Carolina. I just signed a contract here in North Carolina, doing the same job. You know, and it's funny because last year I thought I was done with law enforcement. And because I got into law school, I applied to law school, or excuse me, I finished my master's, I applied to law school. I got into law school, I got into the University of Massachusetts law school program. I was like, you know what? I can't sit behind a desk, man. And I can't sit behind a desk and push papers and stuff like that. You know, like I'm a type of guy, like I have to be outdoors. I have to be interacting with people. I have to be doing, you know, something physical, which is why I loved Alaska so much, because I was constantly outdoors. And yeah, I was like, you know what? Instead of going for law school, I'm going to just go get my PhD in criminology. So what's great about this position and that I'm in now is it's extremely flexible. You know, in the federal government, again, we have a joke here in the States, like the federal government is so useless because federal civilian employees don't practically do anything. We joke, obviously, and I have a lot of flexibility with this job. So I basically do my 12 hours, 3 days a week, and then I'm off for 3 days. So it's easy for me to continue in my schooling and stuff like that, you know, especially with this position at the PhD, man. I thought I could take this position on, but it is so extremely difficult with the amount of research that you have to do. It's tough, but I enjoy it.
Have you actually taken a step back and reflected at all the things you've done, where you've come from and what you've achieved now?
I mean, I wouldn't say I've stopped to reflect. So one thing about me is I try not to. As I've gotten older, I've looked at myself and been like, you know what? Because I fully admit I used to have like this really bad victim mentality, like the world owed me something. And after that experience in Afghanistan, and seeing and meeting the people over there, it kind of changed my whole outlook on life. It changed my perspective on life. And I've never really stopped since I've been home to like look back and think like, well, maybe I should have done this different, or maybe I should have done that different. So no, I've never. I mean, just trying to think about that question, looking back now, I'm like, holy shit, like maybe I actually should stop and smell the roses. But I'm always going 110% no matter what I'm doing.
Because you've done a lot through your short life so far. You've achieved a lot. You've got a lot of life experience. So I think you should be really proud of where you've come from and what you've achieved.
No, absolutely. And I think I would probably say that's probably a problem of mine is I never actually stop and think like, you know, wow, I've done quite a bit, but you know, for me, in the way that my mind works, I'm always looking to do the next thing. It's crazy. I'm always looking to better myself in some type of way. You know, I'm very fortunate in my position, and I'm very grateful for the position that I'm in, because when you've seen that stuff, and I'm sure it's the same thing as a paramedic, police officer, when you see the absolute ugliness of the world, you're very grateful for what you have, and you're not really angry about what you don't have anymore. And and part of that is self-reflection, which I don't do. So when I think about your question, I think like, man, maybe I actually should stop and maybe think for a minute. Maybe I should just stop and think like, wow, you know, it has been a lot. But again, my mindset, I'm constantly looking forward to try for the next thing, which I know I shouldn't be. I do, but maybe one day. Maybe one day I'll slow down.
One day. So what's next on the plans for you? What does the future hold for Demartino?
So for me, it's funny. I have a little girl on the way. My girlfriend, she is 5 months pregnant. So we're gonna establish residency, I guess you could call it. It's funny. She makes fun of me, and she basically tells me like, you know, how are you gonna be as a father? You know, this whole gypsy lifestyle of yours, moving from place to place every couple of years, you know, you're going to have to stop that. And but I told her, I said, you know, while I'm finishing my PhD program, I'm going to continue working, doing the job that I am now, finish school, and just try to build a foundation to give my daughter a life better than what I had. And I'm very fortunate in the fact that I have a partner who is extremely work orientated and does very well with her career as well. So it also, you know, when you have somebody that's like really a really good companion who you mesh with very well, it makes life a lot easier. So I don't really know what the future holds, but I do know that I want to finish school, be a phenomenal father, and hopefully continue somewhere down the line in this crazy career field of mine. And who knows, maybe one day you'll see me in front of Congress because I'll be the director of some federal agency.
I hope so, man. So once you get that PhD, that will make you Dr. Demartino. Is that right?
It will, yeah, which is in my family almost damn near unheard of. Again, I was the first one to graduate college, and I take pride in that. I take pride in the fact that I've done it all by myself. I've done it all. I've gotten to where I am at in life because of hard work. I no longer have that victim mentality, and I have this outlook on life like, the sun, it can't rain all the time. Dr. Demartino, that's crazy when you think about it. Especially
it is crazy
when you think of Lance Corporal Demartino in Darwin, and living in the cans, chugging Sailor Jerry's and doing dumb stuff.
I've still got your patch that you gave me with your name and everything on it, and your rank displayed in the house.
Oh man, get rid of that immediately.
And your white cover. So finally,
I'm sorry. I was going to tell you, you know what? I have so much Marine Corps stuff that I should probably schedule a trip to come back down there and just bring all that stuff to you.
You need them, mate. Memories for your daughter. That's what you need them for.
It's true. Yeah, it's definitely true. But, I don't have any Aussie buddies left in the military, and I always wanted one of their covers. So maybe you could make that happen for me.
I can definitely make that happen. That's very easy. Well, finally, mate, the last thing that I kind of wanted to touch on today is, given your vast experiences through law enforcement, through military, and just life in general, the things that you've seen, the things that you've been a part of. How do you stay so resilient? How do you stay so positive? What do you do that works for you?
I'm an extremely active person, and for me personally, a lot of guys, especially in the paramedic field, law enforcement field, military field, you see the absolute ugliness of the world. When I sit here and think about it, I think I've seen more crap as a police officer than I did as a Marine or, military contractor. But the important thing is that you never bring your work home with you. It's a very fine line to find an outlet. And for me, my outlet is obviously my family, but also staying active. So I go to the gym 4 or 5 times a week. I go to jujitsu 4 to 5 times a week. I love the outdoors. I'm always constantly either hunting or fishing. And I think that is an extremely important side of things, that if you do choose to get into this career field, whether it's military, police officer, paramedic, it's something in that job field, you have to go in with it with an understanding that you are going to be exposed to a lot of the very violent and very sad and vile, malevolent things of this world. And you have to go in there with the understanding that this is your job, but your job does not have to make your character. It doesn't have to be who you are 24/7. I take pride in the fact that when people meet me, the first thing they ask me is really? You're a police officer? I never would have guessed. And that's great for me, because I don't want people to know that. I chose this life. I chose to follow in this career path, and I chose, basically, if God forbid it ever comes down to it, self-sacrifice for the greater good. It is what it is, but you have to go into it with that understanding, to be selfless, and with an understanding hey, my career doesn't have to define who I am as a human being. And I think that's extremely important, to find your outlet. And for me, it's definitely my family and definitely my workout routine. I would caution people, especially when it comes to working out, because it has become an addiction now for me. And it's really hard to break. And some days I wake up and I'm just all right, I'm going to go to the gym. And my girlfriend would be like, you've already been today. Why are you going back? And I'm like, well, because now I have an addiction and don't judge me.
That's it. Hey, man, look, I really, really appreciate you coming on. I really appreciate you sharing your stories for everyone as authentically as you can. I think it's really important for people to know that there's, both highs and lows, ups and downs of what first responders and, military people go through. And I really, really appreciate you sharing that.
Man, you know what, brother? I really can't thank you enough for having me on. I really, really appreciate it. I'm actually extremely happy that we got to do this because, again, it's been way too long, man.
Sure has.
Like I said, you make these friendships in life, and it's extremely important that people like you only come around, once in a lifetime, and you got to keep guys like you close to your circle. And I'm glad that we've kept in contact throughout the years. And again, I really can't thank you enough for having me on. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope your listeners enjoy it.
I'm sure they will, mate. Look, I really appreciate it. We'll catch you again soon.
Awesome, brother. I appreciate it. Thank you, man.